This is being recorded, and if I don't mess up the recording, then it is going to be posted on the UKirk website along with the handouts. There are quite a few people for whom Wednesday afternoons are not great, so they have asked to sit in virtually on our conversation. And so those of you who are just joining us, if you can put your organization next to your name, then we can tell when you speak how you're connected to this auspicious gathering.
For some of us, you're only going to get either our name or our organization.
Yeah.
Just be careful.
Okay.
The name's the main thing.
Okay.
Sure.
We're just glad to have an idea to the extent that we can get it.
And so a few housekeeping things as we begin. As some of you know, I'm Reverend Jenny Norris Lane. I'm the Executive Director of UKirk Collegiate Ministries. And along with Brian Kuhn, the Executive Director, or didn't we just rename you Grand Poobah of PYWA?
Right. Or excellent, what did you say? Excellent. What did you say? I liked what you
Supreme Ruler or something. But at first I said Extreme Ruler, and then I thought, well, maybe that would be better. Is Brian is the Extreme Ruler. And so we are very glad to have all of you join this conversation. As Brian and I talked about what campus ministers and youth workers needed during this time, not only of being exhausted with the pandemic, but also watching our world catch on fire and realizing sort of there's crisis upon crisis. And many of us are trying to figure out what to do for the fall. That maybe a conversation with PDA, who deals with natural and unnatural disasters, and works with teams to think about resilience and decision making. It would be a great thing to have them join us and guide us in this conversation. This is being recorded, just so you know, and wanted to share that. I'm going to introduce Pat Ashley, who is going to moderate our meeting, and wave Pat. And she's with Presbyterian Disaster Assistance, and she's going to give us a few notes on the chat.
Okay, my name is Pat Ashley. I'm a retired Presbyterian pastor from Miami, Florida. I've been with Presbyterian Disaster Assistance serving on the national response team for about 10 years. Before we go further, I'd like to introduce the other two, or have them introduce themselves, the other two people on the PDA team today. Suzanne?
I'm Suzanne Malloy. I'm in Santa Barbara, California. I've been a member of the National Response Team for PDA for 10 years. And I'm currently a hospital chaplain. And before I was hospital chaplain, I was a university chaplain as well. And John?
And I'm John Cheek. I'm an interim pastor serving a church in Tucson, Arizona. It's really a joy to be with all of you. I've been on the national response team for 9 years.
So we want to take a moment to thank you for your work. In this moment of the days that we are in, it's so important to have people who are staying the course and doing what you are doing, and in some cases, not doing what you're not doing. So we are grateful. We are grateful for the support of Presbyterians through the One Great Hour of Sharing offering that makes possible our being able to provide resources like this and to, in other times, be deployed to disasters. Wanted to mention some resources. You may already be aware that the Presbyterian Church USA page has lots of resources. There are highlights for both pandemic resources and racial justice, structural racial justice resources. The PDA page has emotional and spiritual care resources, and also a link to a webinar that can be given live or exists taped, so that you can see a 1-hour webinar on resilience if that is good for you. And also the mental health ministry page on the PCUSA page has great resources. So what we're doing today, our priority is your priority. So we want to invite you to ask questions, and you can signal as best you can with body language, or press the raised hand, and we will try to be alert, and we will help each other be alert, because we want to be responsive to what's most uppermost in your minds and hearts today. We do have some things that we will start presenting, but at any moment, if you want to pursue something further or something else, please do let us know. So we are committed to resilience, to self-care. One of the things that we do in times of disaster, and have done for years, is to offer resilience for people who are living in recovery and in response. We know that being able to breathe and being able to relax our bodies is essential to be able to keep on keeping on, which is one of the meanings of resilience, the capacity to sustain our work. So Suzanne, would you offer a breathing exercise to help us practice what we're preaching here?
I think to start out, the most useful exercise is being aware of your breath. I would just like to invite you right now to relax, perhaps set your shoulders, be aware of that tension that's in your shoulders that I'm seeing already on the screen. And put both of your feet flat on the floor, if you're able to do that, if you're not reclining. And just pay attention to your breath. Don't control it, just be aware of it. Just notice if you're breathing fast or shallow, if you're feeling tight anywhere in your body as you're breathing. Just focus on your breath. Being aware of your breath is one of the first steps to resilience, because as you're aware of your breath, you become aware of what else is going on in your body. And so it's really important for you to become relaxed in the body. You may have noticed that while you were just observing your own breath, that perhaps your mind was slowing down and that you were becoming a little relaxed in your body. As we are dealing with a lot of tension these days, it's really important to accept all the information that comes to us, but in a relaxed way. Pat?
We also have become aware over time that recovering from a disaster, there tend to be some emotional patterns that are typical across human beings. And if people like us who are also helping other people recover are aware of those patterns, that sometimes is helpful. John's going to lead us through some recognition of those patterns. And so, Ginny, this is the moment. Let me see the chat. Oh yeah, mute yourselves if you're not speaking. So we need the chart, Ginny and John.
We'll see the chart here in a minute. I want to tell you before we see it on our screen that this has been, for me, of all the materials that I've been exposed to in disaster response, this has been the most helpful for me in understanding what is going on with me, myself, and what's going on with the people we deploy to help. This chart, the horizontal axis is time, starting to your left and carrying out into the future on the right. The vertical axis is emotional well-being, or the sense of emotional well-being. And so I'm going to talk more about the middle part of this than anything else. When a disaster occurs, and this is largely true whether it is a natural disaster or a human-caused disaster, there is an emotional response, and if we look at the impact, what's marked stage 2, there's a sense of fear, of shock, of hope, of despair, something like that. But that initial stage is fairly short-lived. And what follows, this was not intuitive to me, but it's borne out in every deployment I've gone on. And that is that immediately following the impact of the disaster is this dramatic increase in a sense of emotional well-being. And we call this the heroic phase, or the honeymoon phase. Everybody is pulling together, everybody is holding hands. We are going to do it together. You remember the theater shooting in Aurora, Colorado. That happened Thursday night, Friday morning, just about midnight. I was on a team deployed there. I was on the ground at 3 o'clock Friday afternoon in Denver. And already in the airport, I was seeing signs that said Aurora Strong. Aurora Strong is an indicator of the honeymoon phase. We're all going to get through this. We're all going to come out of it stronger than before. This is language that you've heard before. And I don't mean to diminish it. It's good that there is this point where we're so hopeful and so optimistic. The difficult news is that the heroic phase, or the honeymoon phase, is followed by a very precipitous drop in the sense of emotional well-being. And that happens to individuals, it happens to churches, it happens to communities as well. And that drop is quick and hard, and when it happens, it's vitally important that we take care of ourselves, particularly if we are in the business of caring for other people, providing emotional or spiritual care for other people. It's critically important that we understand that this is a part of it. The other piece that's really important is that there is a bottom to this. It's not just a forever drop into hopelessness and disillusionment and despair. There is a bottom, and then the road back. If this chart was more accurate, that climb out from the bottom back to whatever the new normal is would be more gradual in slope. There would be probably more jagged places where anniversaries happen or other kinds of events bring back the trauma of this. But overall, there's a trajectory toward a new normal, which is emotionally healthy. So I'm wondering if 2 or 3 of you would be willing to say, A, whether or not this makes sense to you, but B, more importantly to me, is do you find yourself somewhere on this chart with respect to COVID-19, with respect to racial unrest and unrest around police violence? I'm wondering if you find yourself anywhere on this chart, And after you've had a chance to say that, I'll kind of tell you where I am and where I find myself.
And John, happily, we have more participants than we anticipated. So it may be a little trickier to be as conversational as we initially planned. Let's try to do that and see if it works, but also please feel free to make use of the chat to offer your reflections. But if a couple of you would like to speak to John's invitation, please do that. And I'd say just dive in and speak, and we'll see how that goes.
I'm kind of hearing crickets here. And so I think I'm probably just going to tell you where I am and then invite more conversation if you want to do it. And then I'd like to lead you through an exercise. With respect to COVID, here in Tucson, we are having an awful lot of new cases. It is an ongoing disaster, and we kind of find ourselves in the earlier part of this chart again and again and again, cycling through this. I don't know if any of you have that same kind of a sense. With me, early on in the disaster in Tucson in February and into March, I was thinking, well, this will give us a chance to try new things. We will have new approaches and new opportunities. This is an opportunity. That's the way I thought of it. And I'm not there anymore. I am well down this chart. I am well down on that drop in disillusionment. I see a couple of others have said that you find yourself in this stage as well. So the thing to know, I think the critically important thing to know about this is that this is a natural part of how we respond to disaster. It is going to happen. It's going to happen to you, and it's going to happen to the people that you're serving. It happens to all three of us, to Pat and Suzanne and me. We know maybe more about it, but it doesn't prevent us from experiencing these things. And so I have a sense that it's really important for us to have some tools to be able to work with this. Now, I'll tell you that on the issue of racial justice and police violence, I am up here in the heroic and honeymoon phase. I believe, and this doesn't mean you need to believe it, this is me speaking and not PDA. I believe that the Holy Spirit is leading the church to a crossroads where we can make different decisions than the church made in the 1950s and 60s when the civil rights issue was being debated among the main lines. I find myself up here in the heroic and honeymoon phase with respect to that. With respect to the COVID, I'm well down this slope into disillusionment. So I want to give you an exercise here, and I'm going to use my own context where I'm sitting in my office, but I would encourage you to join this if you feel like you can. So again, I'm going to ask you to sit comfortably. I'd like your hands in your lap. I'd like your feet comfortably on the floor. And as I sit, I become aware of the soles of my feet. And I feel the sensation of the soles of my feet. And I am aware of the interaction between the soles of my feet and the socks that I'm wearing. And I'm in contact with the inner sole of my shoe. It's a little bit cushiony, and I'm in contact with it. And I'm also in contact with the outer sole of my shoe, which is harder. And I'm in contact with each of those things. And I'm aware that my feet are on a carpet, and I'm in contact with the carpet. And I'm aware that under the carpet is a carpet pad of some kind, and then a concrete slab. And I'm in contact with that. And that slab rests on the desert floor. It rests on the good earth, which God created and called it good. And I am in contact from the soles of my feet to the desert floor. Millions and millions and millions of years it's been here. It's reliable and trustworthy, and I'm in contact with it. And I become aware of the palms of my hands, and I feel where the palms of my hands are touching the cloth of my pants, and I'm aware that I'm in contact with that. Beneath that is my leg. It's skin and muscle tissue and bone and muscle tissue and skin and more cloth. And I'm in contact with all of it. And I'm aware of it. And I'm aware of the seat of the chair where I'm sitting. And the seat is cushiony, a little soft, it has a give. And I'm in contact with that. But the legs of the chair are strong and solid, and they rest on the carpet, and I'm in contact with the carpet and the pad beneath it and the concrete slab and the desert floor, the good earth, reliable and trustworthy, and I am in contact with that good earth. I am grounded to the earth. And I am aware of the skin on my back, and I can be aware of the sensation where the skin of my back touches the shirt that I'm wearing. And I'm in contact with the back of the chair, which is cushiony and has give. But the legs of the chair are solid and reliable. And I'm in contact with the legs of the chair and with the carpet and the pad and the concrete slab. And I am in contact with the desert floor, the good earth. God created it and called it good, and it is good, and I am grounded in that. And my body can relax, my muscles can relax, and I can find a moment of quiet and peace and relaxation in this exercise, and I can return to this place of relaxation anytime I choose to by focusing on the soles of my feet, and that will begin a cascade that will ground me to the earth. Now I'll invite you to join me again. For me, when we are in this place of disillusionment, when we are on that slope, in order for us to be able to be authentically who we are, to give the very best we can give, we need to have exercises. The one that I've given you is the best one for me. I don't know if it's the best one for you. PDA has resources for a number of kinds of grounding and relaxation exercises. The one I've given you is the one that I consistently use, and it carries me and allows me to authentically be the pastor I am, the friend I am, the husband I am. It allows me to authentically be myself through this time of disillusionment. And I wonder, I haven't paid any attention to chat, I wonder if there are questions or concerns or comments about any of that.
Please feel free throughout this time to make use of the chat to offer comments and questions, and we'll try to be alert to it. The more that we can share, the better. We are aware that many of you are in a state of ambiguity concerning what will happen with your work, and that you're not in the same ambiguity as each other because different institutions are functioning in different ways. Ginny will be sending you a handout with a variety of exercises that you might begin to explore. and also some tips for relaxation and emotional and spiritual care. Here's a question, and John, why don't you take the lead? How do you navigate being in different systems that are clearly in different stages? Yeah.
Well, one of the important pieces to me, I think, is to know where you yourself are on this chart. And that will help ground you in whatever else you're going to do. I think the key piece to it is to recognize, for those people who are in the heroic or honeymoon phase, for those people who are in that phase, they can be pretty annoying because they're all jazzed up about creative things. And some of us are inclined to say, just stop it. Just stop. If we recognize that that's a function of the way human beings process disaster, we can be patient with them. And at the same time, if we are encountering somebody who is at the very trough, we can recognize that that's a natural response to where they are, that they are not trying to bring us down, we can recognize that they are where they are and that we can be present to them. I think presence is the most important piece in how we lead people and how we serve colleagues. Recognize where they are. You may find this chart helpful in giving them language for where they are, but I think the key piece is to recognize that all of this is normal and natural and it's not forever. Honeymoon is not forever. The trough is not forever. Even the new normal is not forever. Now, I don't remember who asked that question. I wonder if that's a helpful answer to how we deal with people at different stages.
We've had a follow-up or a related question. How do we, and Suzanne, maybe if you can ponder this one for an initial response. How do we lead the people around us through acknowledging where they are at on this spectrum? And Ginny, maybe it's good if we stop the screen sharing so that we're just us. Yeah, there we go. So Suzanne, do you have an initial word for that? And then John and I can chime in too.
My initial word on this is adapting. Is we acknowledge where we are first, personally, in COVID, in protests, in police violence, where we are in our own personal faith, where we do check-ins with ourselves to begin with. But we also know that it's really necessary to adapt to the circumstances and be very careful in regards to expectations. Some of us may say, well, the government is planning on reopening. We're already reopening. Things are going to be going back to normal. But I think what we need to do is understand that the pandemic is kind of a moving target. It moves around, it changes, things get better, things get worse. In some communities are anticipating a second wave. Some communities recognize that they're still in a first wave or in a microwave. And adapting to the circumstances is really key. And I think it also is being aware of the resentments that we have, that life isn't normal, and to understand that those resentments are something that we can control, because what we want to do is we want to be present for not only for ourselves and our families, but also for our students. We want to be present for our communities. And the best way that we do that is we espouse adapting to the situations. Obviously, this Zoom meeting is an adaptation, and I would gather that pretty much everybody on this call has adapted and become much more familiar with Zoom or Teams or GoToMeetings. I think all of us have grown incredibly in terms of the way that we communicate with others. And I'll stop here so that Pat and John can jump in.
You know, one of the things we can be mindful of doing is being aware of how we want to be. And that doesn't mean, oh, I don't want to be disillusioned. We can be aware of, I'm in disillusionment, and when I am with other persons, even when I'm with myself, I want to be present, I want to be engaged, I want to be attentive to their needs, or whatever that desire. It's so important for each person to be sure to name that for ourselves, how we want to be as we are in what we are really in, both emotionally and just physically, and in terms of the events swirling around us. So one thing that has proved helpful is to be aware of why we're doing our work, the purpose of our work, and we may have to really rename what that purpose is in these times, at least for some of you. And renaming that is okay, and probably is going to be useful and open up the possibility of some creativity. What is my offering in this situation to the people that I am serving right now? And that staying in touch with, why do I get out of bed in the morning? Why am I picking up the phone? Why am I getting into this Zoom meeting? What do I hope will come of it? What is important about it? What's valuable about it? And what's fulfilling to me about it? So that intentionality about work can be one of the tools of resilience that we can. It takes some commitment, and it takes probably a daily check-in. One of the things I do is we complete this sentence: I do this work because. And if each of you would take a moment to just complete that sentence, or it might be, what's important to me, or I am called to, and have a one-line phrase. Then if that's available to you, you can say it perhaps out loud to yourself as you're picking up the phone to make the phone call. Oh yeah, I'm making this phone call not to check it off the list, but I'm making it because here's why it's important to me. The same thing if you are with somebody and they are in their reactivity to everything that's going on, to remind yourself, okay, I am here with this person, and I am here because. So that's one possibility. Others have comments, and I see the chat's going along very well. Yeah. I see a question from Brian. Have we seen age play a role in a person's resilience? I haven't noticed particularly age as a big factor. I notice in myself as I age that I have a better capacity for resilience, but it's because I've been paying attention to it for a couple of decades. So partly it's a matter of commitment to being resilient when the world around us is a roller coaster.
Yeah, I haven't seen age play a significant difference either, although I'm attuned to this because I have a diagnosis of depression. I take medication and I see a therapist, and I function well, but I do have depression to the extent that the elderly population is more at risk for depression. I think it's easier for disillusionment to start sooner and to last longer. I think that could be the case. I've never thought about it before, but off the top of my head, I could think that's a way age could play a role, but I wouldn't bet the farm on that proposition.
I noticed there was a question from Ginny about how do you get rid of or put resentments aside, and I think that comes back to what Pat said about being in touch with our purpose. What is my purpose? And when something happens that makes me start to feel resentful, for me, I return to what is my purpose in this circumstance? And is my purpose to help others? Is my purpose to provide spiritual care? Is my purpose to bring encouragement to others? And so I try to frame frustrations, resentments. What I try to do is realize that I make a choice about those and about having those resentments. And what I do is I make myself come into the present and say, this is the circumstance right now. There is something I need to deal with, and I need to find the best way to do that so that I can pursue my ministry, my purpose.
I also try to be mindful of deciding not to try to get rid of it, because there it is. It's like,
yeah,
get rid of the air. It's there it is. So I might, but I make a choice to say, I think I'm not going to be about resentment, at least right now. And I might go to the trouble of choosing a time to rant when I will do no one any harm about resentment. I might spew it all out on a piece of paper. I might walk around and yell if I'm in a place where I can do that without bothering other people, and name all of the things I resent. And, the Psalms are, lament is one of the theological terms for that. Just go for it and then say, oh, and there are other things going on besides my resentment. I'm also grateful. I'm also hopeful. I'm also kind of wanting to feel something else. I wonder what's possible for me. Another thing that is one of our theme songs is the importance of acknowledging that we do not have to figure this out by ourselves. We feel alone sometimes, and when we haven't been in the same room with another human being for a long time, it's easy to feel alone, but we are in this with the community of faith, with the community of people who are working with youth and young adults, with the world that is trying to sort this out. And one of the tools that we lift up, and John, I'm going to throw this to you, is to be intentional about who is it good for me to speak with about these things, for me to find my way in it. So John, say a word about that.
I feel very strongly that we need to have, each of us needs to have what we call an intentional listening partner. And an intentional listening partner is someone who can take your call, listen to you, not try to fix you, gently help you to be accountable. But as Pat said, if she needs to rant, and if I'm her intentional listening partner, I need to be prepared to just listen to Pat and let her say the things she needs to say in the ways she needs to say them, and not try to interrupt or fix her or explain to her how she's mistaken about this. I feel very strongly that you should have at least 2 intentional listening partners who have covenanted with you to listen to you. If you give them goals that you want to achieve and invite them to, they can help you to be accountable to those goals, but in a very gentle way. This is a time I'm going to encourage all of you to be gentle with yourselves. My own belief is that this intentional listening partner should not be a spouse or partner. I've been married 35 years. My own view is that marriage is hard enough without adding this burden to it. I don't mean that I keep secrets from my wife. I do mean that I have people that I call and talk to about the stresses of work, the stresses of my environment, and they have agreed to be in that relationship with me. I think it's important for both parties to understand that this is what the relationship is. I think it's important for not only for you to have an intentional listening partner, I think it would be good for you to offer to be someone else's intentional listening partner. And that could be the same person. You could have a reciprocal arrangement, or you could be a listening partner to someone else than the person who is your listening partner. There's a lot of flexibility in that, but I feel pretty strongly that we have to have somebody that we can call. There have to be boundaries. I won't call after this time. I won't call on these days unless it's a crisis. But I think it's really important to have that arrangement. And I wonder if that idea makes sense to you. I see some nods. I only have 25 of you on my screen, so I don't know about the rest, but this is a piece that I feel quite strongly about. Pat, you're still muted.
I was typing. I've been asked to speak of having to make decisions in the midst of stress, like whether or not to have in-person gatherings in the fall. So there's that decision that's looming for you. And Suzanne, I'll say a few words, and then Suzanne and John, you could be ready to dive in. So here's this decision that you know is kind of out there. You know you don't have enough information right now to make that decision. You know that lots of other people have lots of other decisions to make before you can get into that process. So it's weighing, it's weighty. People that you are working with want to know the answer to that question. Big time, yeah, big time. And you want to know the answer to that question, and you'd love to be able to give a clear answer to one question in the midst of this. And probably the decision making about that is going to have to do with, I am going to be alert to information. I am going to know that this is not the moment for me to decide that. I am going to be aware that I want to help other people become creative in how they are living with this ambiguity, which may be that in itself is a decision, and that may be a ministry for the next few months, how to help people live in ambiguity when they don't know, they can't decide, other people are in charge, and sometimes nobody's in charge and nothing's happening. So again, it's our mindfulness, our awareness of our experience of that need to get the decision made, and our willingness to learn how to relax our bodies, because a key to resilience, I believe, each of us, the three of us from PDA, each have our theme songs, and one of mine is relaxation. If we can relax our bodies when things are swirling around us, we have a chance to stay present and to be a positive force with the people with whom we are in contact. So certainly any of you can also respond to this, but John or Suzanne, if you have other things to offer.
In terms of decision-making, Pat, I think you named that sometimes the decisions may be out of our control. Some decisions are. The universities that you serve, certainly they're making decisions for instructors, for organizations on campus, and they may be following state or county guidelines or rules, actually, more than guidelines. And so I think the communications with the university, with the student body, with those who oversee what the student organizations do, I think that communication is going to be really important. And keeping and conveying what you are learning, conveying on a regular basis with your student groups is going to be really important too. And sometimes that communication may be, you know what, they're still looking at different things. The university's working on testing, the university's working on bringing research assistants back, and they're going to be allowing students in the dorms, maybe 1 or 2 per room instead of the 3 or 4 that are normally per room. Everything that you learn, I think, is really helpful to convey to your students, for one thing. So that constant communication, if nothing else, what you're doing is you're maintaining a relationship with those in your group. And that relationship is as important as the communications.
The only thing I would add is to underline something Suzanne said. I think it's really important for you to recognize, to clarify for yourself the things that are under your control and the things that are not under your control, and for you to spend your energy on the things that are in your control and not invest so much energy on the things that are not. Pat, if it's okay with you, I would really like to respond to Brian's question because I think it's really important.
Go ahead.
Brian's question says, how do we find peace when we have learned that what we do determines our worth? When we don't feel like we were able to do what gives us worth, how do we continue to feel worthy? I think, Brian, that you have named a learning which is absolutely untrue. And many of us have been taught this, but it is absolutely untrue. Your worth does not come from what you do. Your worth does not come from what you do. Your worth comes from the fact that you're created in the image of God and that you are beloved of God. And that's the ground of your worth. And what we do, what the work that I do, either as an interim pastor or as a volunteer with the National Response Team, is in response to the love that God has shown me. I'm good at disaster work, but that doesn't give me worth. The only worth I have comes from the fact that I am beloved of God. And so unlearning that, which is hard in our culture, but unlearning that, I think, is the critical piece. And if we can unlearn that idea that what we do determines our value, I think that's the most important piece. And my sisters may want to speak to that, but I think that's a critical piece.
And out of that created belovedness, then where I'm going to go is how I am before what I do. And the what I do rises out of how I am, given that I am created and loved. So there's some reframing is a way to begin that unlearning process. And I mean, it's a great conversation to have with people who are good to have that conversation with, and to say, this pandemic is a great time to do this inner work of looking at our own worth. And certainly the people with whom you are working, it's an opportunity. If that is lively for you, it's likely that you can bring that liveliness to them as well, because there they are, and their lives are really up in the air. So
what I've heard both Pat and John say is that our worth is way more than what we do. And it's who we are, it's our being. And I think for us as disaster responders, we've learned that the more we try to do sometimes, the less effective we are. And so a good part of our ministry is simply being present. And so we are being, and we are present. We are making ourselves available, and that presence often is just plain listening. Sometimes it's just sitting with someone, even if it's on a FaceTime or on a Zoom, and just hearing what comes from deep down from other people. I also would like to add that when we really feel gratitude, that's when we really get in touch with our worth. Pat, is this a good time to just talk a little bit more about gratitude? I'm not talking about false positives. I'm not talking about not acknowledging the challenges in our lives, but to take time every day to focus on what we're grateful for. I've developed a personal practice, and you have to practice stuff to get good at it. You really have to practice stuff. What I do is in the morning, I write down things that I expect. I just have a little list. I'm not the greatest journaler, but I'm good at bullet points, and I can, and so I can write 3 things at the beginning of my day of where I'm going to look for gratitude in my day. And when I go to bed, I go ahead and write down the things that I've been grateful for. And sometimes those align with what I'm looking for in the morning, but often I'm surprised by something that has happened, that has come into my life, and it may be something very, very small. But what it does is it resets my brain, and it takes me away from stress, and it brings me back into my present, and it brings me back into simply being.
Yeah, so we're in, let me look at the question. Anything particular mindful of being present for those that are already shifting naturally to new stages, those in new ministry calls, youth and young adults moving from elementary to middle school to high school to college. One of the things that occurs to me just as I'm reading that is, if there's any way that you can be in touch with those persons with whom you've been working to say, how's that going for you? And give them a chance to talk about, they can talk both about just how they are in this stuff, but also if they are at a moment of transition in their own lives, to give them a chance to name that and to speak with you, and encourage them to be in conversation with others about how that is, certainly. But acknowledging the level, it's one thing to say, I'm moving from elementary school to junior high or to middle school. It's another thing to say, I'm doing that in a pandemic when I don't know where I'm going to be in the fall. I don't know if I'm going to be in a building. I don't know if I'm going to be at home. And so just acknowledging that, and then inviting those conversations, if you feel able to receive the conversations, could be very helpful. One of the other terms we throw around is coping ahead. So if we can envision, and each of you may have some individual envisioning to do, because you're all in different geographic places and with different institutions, if we can envision what's coming, whether it's more ambiguity or whether it's, you know that there's a moment that's going to come when you haven't been able to do anything, you haven't done anything, you've been waiting and wondering, and then all of a sudden, here's what's happening, and here are the 800,000 things that have to happen between now and then. If you can look to what you know may be coming your way, you can start just meandering around with it, brainstorming, playing with it. How do I want to, what's possible if that happens, or if that happens, so that the what if is not what if and oh dear, but what if and what's possible? How might that be a good thing? How could I make the most of that? And so the sort of experimental quality could be helpful, a sense of, we're going to try something, and if it works, we're going to keep going and building on it. If it doesn't work, we get to try something else. So some open-mindedness about how to move into those possibilities.
Another thing I'd like to add about being mindful of being present. We're not going to be able to do that unless we start practicing ourselves on being mindful, unless we start practicing self-care. Those who are moving to different stages of their education, different stages in their lives, they're going to need to understand that they have to care for themselves, just as you have to care for yourself. When you practice yourself, then you can more legitimately encourage others to do that. And by self-care, we're talking about wise choices. Are we self-medicating with things that we don't need to self-medicate with? Are we practicing? Are we exercising? Are we eating healthy foods? Are we getting fresh air? Some of us may live in a place where air isn't very fresh, but having even being able to sit next to an air purifier if we need to, finding what ends up being good for our bodies and what ends up giving us strength. I think that also helps us, and then we can legitimately encourage others to do the same.
And one thing to do for self-care is to decide, okay, I'm going to set apart a block of time when I am not going to think about my work. And if you keep going around in circles thinking about your work, do some things to help you not. Like, in that period of time, since I know work's going to circle around in my mind, I'm going to sing songs. I'm gonna march around and sing, or certainly exercise is an enormous help with that. Using another part of our being that's not getting enough use these days. It's sort of atrophying because we're doing this trying to sort out our work, and certainly finding goofy YouTube videos to look at, or getting creative about our use of media, or just doing something that makes us smile for no other reason than it's amusing. That's part of self-care too.
My wife and I are learning how to weave, and we have 2 looms in our living room. And we just got rid of a 3rd loom, but we think 2 looms probably isn't enough. That's a creative release for us that requires enough of our attention that when we are weaving, we can't focus on work. We can't focus on whether or not we're going to be able to return to gathered worship at this congregation in the month of July or August. Weaving takes enough attention for me. The same with making stuff out of leather. I make a lot of different stuff out of leather. Doing that work requires enough attention that I can have a vacation from thinking about work. That's another piece. I don't mean to put pressure on you. Oh, good, now I have to learn a new thing. I don't mean that. But some kind of a creative outlet that allows you to have a vacation from thinking about your work is a really, really good thing for you.
I am mindful of our time and that we are at the announced time. So perhaps, I don't know if there's any final word anyone wants to say. I want to say that I so appreciate your taking the time to attend to these matters for yourself and for your own well-being. And it's been such a privilege to be with this group of people. And I'm glad to know that you have each other and that you are looking at each other's faces and know that you are there.
And I'll just offer a thank you from both PYWA and UKirk to the amazing work that John and Pat and Suzanne are doing. And we're so grateful for PDA and its willingness to walk with us during this as we all kind of learn together. But we all get to, like Pat, exactly like you said, we all get to do it together. And there is something beautiful about that. I just offer this to all of you that, yeah, what a great reminder to take care of yourself. We tend to be people who reach out to others very quickly and very well. The young people and the families who we are blessed to be in ministry with, but we don't, we're not always really good at pausing and taking care of ourselves. So that's one of the things I'm walking away with for sure today. Also that we give ourselves, John, I think you said it, permission to go easy on ourselves. Let's not get too hard on ourselves right now.
Right.
Because we are just trying to figure it out. And I know we're all in positions and have professions where often we are bombarded with questions and people want to know. And a lot of times they want to know to relieve their own anxieties. But the reality is it's okay to say, we don't know where that is going yet. I have to be thoughtful about that. We have to continue to be prayerful about that. And we'll see. So that's not an easy thing for youth workers to do sometimes. I'm going to assume the same can be felt for those who do campus ministry. So y'all, thank you for your amazing words and your amazing work. We are hoping that this is not hoping, we're planning on having a second conversation with youth workers and campus ministers at the end of July, as we have a better sense of what a lot of schools are going to be doing, how we as youth workers can be preparing our graduates who are going off into college for this different sort of experience they may be walking into. We also want to hear from I know youth workers want to hear from campus ministers as to all things, how we can take care of our college students when they're home, if they are at home and they don't have that connectivity and that connection that they've come to know on campus and in places. So more conversation on that at the end of July. Jenny, what's the date? Do you have that date off the top of your head?
Yes, it's July 22nd at 3 p.m. So kind of same bat time, same bat channel, but a month from now. Great.
Could I close this with a prayer? And then if anybody has any, and if Pat, John, and Suzanne, if you're willing to hang around for 5 minutes, if anybody has any more kind of last minute questions or something that popped up, or maybe they didn't want to ask in front of the whole group, please feel free to hang back and we can chat for a few more minutes. But let's pray. Our gracious and loving and giving and present God, thank you for this time. It is always good to be together and to see faces and hear voices and to be reminded of your presence and the wisdom that you have given us to share with one another. We give thanks for the work of PDA, for the work of UKirk, for the work of PYWA in all times, but especially in this time where we need to be reminded of the needs of others, this time where we need to be reminded of how to take care of ourselves, and this time that we need to be reminded of your constant presence and love for all of us, your entire world, even when it feels like the world is not stable beneath us. Give us the strength to continue to move forward. Give us the courage to hear and see you in surprising and new ways, and fill us with your love that we get to share with one another in all that we do every day. And it's in Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Thank you all. Thanks everybody for being here. I saw things on the group about getting access to the recording, and I think we're going to try to get that out to you in a couple different ways. So
yes.
Thank you all for being here.
Thank you. Have a good week.
Will do.
Hey, Brian.
Yeah.
You talked about the anxiety that people feel when parents are asking you all that stuff, and someone had mentioned, I think it might have been you, with the worth question. What if we combine both of those? Because what I'm struggling with now is parents who want to know exactly what things are going to be looking like, and I've got no clue. And some people that think that ministry isn't happening right now, even though it totally is. And so I'm getting both of those sides shoved at me, and just wondering if you guys could help me figure out wonderful ways to navigate all of that.
Yeah, I mean, what a difficult thing, and I think that is probably happening in a lot of places.
Yeah, and that's what I'm seeing, but that still doesn't help the anxiety that comes with people saying, so when are you doing this? When are you doing that? And my response is, when's the government going to let me? When's our safety committee going to allow me to do these things? And I don't have definite answers, and I'm getting some pushback on that. And so I'm also getting some people in the congregation going, during the summer, this is what you did. I mean, we had 4 major trips. We had all these different things going on in the summer, and this summer is obviously looking very different. We haven't left. We're not going anywhere. And so now people are wondering what I'm doing. And I'm like, we're doing things.
Well, one thing occurs to me is for you to name your ministry and claim it and be proud of it. So that it's you don't have to present it defensively, but rather to say, listen, here's what we're doing in this time. Yeah. It's sort of it could change the tone of the conversation if you can get past that sense of being pushed and say, let me tell you what we're doing.
Right.
And you can do that more easily if you have a relaxed body. If you can find ways to do these exercises, the one that I did or another one, in the midst of those conversations, if you can relax your body, you can function more in your prefrontal cortex where you need to be for that. And so we tell people, oh, just relax. But if you can make your muscles relax, you can be more authentically who you are, and you can do better at the things that you're trying to do.
Yeah, and there are exercises to be able to do that. There are ways to practice and learn that. You don't have to make it up.
And I would just add to all of that, I think that's beautiful, and that we're also, even though it's in the midst of anxiety, it's hard to teach people new things, right? They don't want to necessarily learn something, but I think
There's some follow-up questions.
I think it is okay to, one, ask why it's important. Why is that important to them? I'm curious, why is it important that I do that? What does that do to help you better understand what it is that I am or what my purpose is? But also to help them remember that the ministry isn't the program. Programs are what come out of the ministry, but they aren't the ministry. And youth ministry continues without Mission Trip or without Montreat or whatever it is that you're missing, right? I think youth ministry is one of those things that oftentimes people get really hung up on that, where they kind of define the youth ministry is the mission trip. And if there is no mission trip, then there must not be a youth ministry. And they miss that. No, the mission trip is in response to the ministry that we're doing with the youth. It isn't the ministry that we do with the youth. Does that make sense?
You know, Brian, you're talking a little bit about reframing things. I mean, that's definitely a reframing, and it just brings to mind what I've been studying across our denomination and others is, mission trip often means going away someplace. But to reframe the mission as, you know what, we are going to be working as a group safely in accordance with the health regulations, and we're going to take on as our mission this summer or this fall as working in the food distribution lines, or designing a program that's going to assist the immediate community. That's just, it's just one way to do that. The church I've been attending, we just completed 6 weeks of food distribution lines, and it was very, very intensive, volunteer intensive, energy intensive. And the only way we were able to do it is we invited 2 other churches in our neighborhood to participate. And the biggest participants were the youth, because they couldn't go anywhere. And we ended up having a line of 300 cars that went from our church parking lot to 2 other parking lots, and their youth were directing traffic. We outfitted them with safety gear, the reflective vests, taught them a little bit about traffic. And the highway patrol even came by and said, wow, you guys are doing a great job. And we just finished that. We just completed that. And now one of these other churches have come to us and said, we have an opportunity now to do some food distribution. Will you jump in with us? And now the youth from our church are saying, oh, yeah, can we help them now? It's just looking at different ways of doing things that we've just never done before, but some of that can be really amazing.
Yeah. Yep.
I gotta say, it's exhausting coming up with new things all the time.
Yeah.
I've been 20 years, and I am so mentally and emotionally exhausted trying to come up with new things.
Yeah.
I've come up with more new things since March than I have in probably the previous 10 years that I've been doing music. And that has just taken its absolute toll on me. And, so I'm at that point.
Yeah.
Brainstorm with other people.
Yeah.
And respite time is really important as well. So I'm hoping that you're giving yourself some respite time. It's not an escape, but what it is it's look at some respite time as re-energizing yourself, renewing yourself, empowering yourself to move on, however you're going to do that.
Right.
And it is interesting. I found myself, I just took the last 2 days off, but it took me a day to stop thinking about work. And because I'd wake up and think about work, and because I'm always home, I'm always near my computer.
Yeah.
And I realized I've got to set better boundaries with that, because I was spent all the time because I was always plugged in. But I was really thinking about, I don't think we give our youth or our young adults enough credit to come up with new things, or to grieve what we're not having. So I love Brian's question about, why is that important to you, right? Because I think that parents especially are afraid that that their kids are going to lose God this summer, and maybe because the parent is losing God in the middle of the pandemic, right?
Mm-hmm.
And because all of the ways that we used to connect are different. So what does it mean to talk to kids about grief? And to talk to the parents about grieving and parenting in the midst of grief. It's going to be really interesting on college campuses, because a lot of college campuses are not letting parents get out of the car. So you're going to have to drop your kid off at the dorm. People will take their stuff, disinfect their stuff, and you will have to say goodbye in the car. So even just naming that the rituals that we look forward to are not here this summer. And it feels weird. But also, you know, that the relationships are still happening. But I would say after one day of unplugging, not even a full day, I got on my computer last night when I got home, that it really, I was surprised how much I was always kind of in fight or flight mode, right? What's the next email? What's the next question? Which I didn't kind of realize, I think.
Yeah, my home has turned into my office, obviously, like everybody else. And so that's changed how I view work. I mean, it used to be that I'd come into the office, I'd do things, I'd go home, and there'd be no more ministry stuff thinking about. But I now walk past my office 20 times a day, or sit in it for 8 hours, 10 hours a day. And that's been difficult to disassociate the two from each other. So
one of the things that I have recommended with respect to that, I was going to say it to Jenny, but for people who work at home, and I'm continuing to come to my office, it's empty and the building's empty, but I continue to come. I would encourage you, when you're at home, if you're going to do church work, put on a lanyard, put on some indicator that this is work and I'm in work mode. And when you're finished with that, take it off and set it down, and teach yourself not to do work unless you have that on. A couple of people have found that really useful, because otherwise you're working 20 hours a day, 18 hours a day. And we all know that's unsustainable, but it is one of the really treacherous things about working at home. So I'm going to encourage you both to try that and see if that's helpful to you to differentiate your work life from your home life.
So instead of a lanyard, maybe pants.
There you go.
A little too much information there, Adrian.
I'm kidding. Well, thank you all so much for your time today. I've got to run and get something set up for a program that we are doing tonight. Way different than we've ever done it. So.
Yeah, well, hope it goes well.
Good to be with you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Good to be with you.
Good to be with you.